When I first designed this, thought about this, considered this topic for this presentation, it was monkey see, monkey do. I was just going to sit here and talk for a while about what people would need to buy their first uncapper and extractor, and to get started. What would you do if you've been keeping bees now for 3 years and you got 10, 12 colonies? When is it time to move? That was my original premise. And then as I began to do the background work for setting this up, I just casually went to the web. If you'll look way, way up at the top, I think I came across 114,000 hits on people doing their own thing. So I'm comfortable telling you that the mobile phone is now officially part of the beekeeper's repertoire in the yard. So if you got a smoker, yep, check. Got a hive tool, yep. Smoker fuel, matches, yep. Mobile phone, yep. So it seems like every beekeeper with a phone has been snapping pictures and making videos. So it was really kind of a Me Too thing, and as I realized that this had been done very well, the main point I wanted to make anyway is, how do you make, as a beekeeper, the decisions required to purchase the equipment for processing honey? Because in each of these videos, they start, in most cases, with the equipment already there, the comb size, hot knives, everything is fixed and ready to go. And it's in decision making. And since, for about the last 10 years, there's been a lot of new beekeepers that have come crashing in to beekeeping's craft, and you're everyone welcome to be here. But you brought with you different expectations, different needs, different interests, and you are no longer just the traditional beekeeper who's doing it for some sideline income and maybe for some pollination. Each one of you has a different agenda. And ironically, this screen capture that I did just on a YouTube page, look at the very top picture of someone just crushing comb into a bucket there and going to let it drain. And then look all the way down at the bottom at a piece of machinery I'll show you a photograph of later that probably cost several $100,000 to extract honey in a large operation. So I didn't mean to, but it's poetic that the top picture from mudsongs.org compared to it extracting honey at Lee's Bees of Texas, all the way down at the bottom, does a pretty good job of showing the gamut that can be run when you start trying to process this honey and make this work. I put most of this in The Hive and the Honeybee, chapter 16, Honey and Wax. There's even more about the honey house layout and design and whatever. But if I've glossed over something too lightly and I'm too hard to reach or don't write you back fast enough, then have a look there and see if you can find some of the information that you may be missing. So there's a lot available on the web, and what I'd like to do is to essentially fill in the blanks in between and around some of the issues that go on. I don't mean to be impolite, I don't mean to be crude, but our 444 mothers and fathers just somehow covered up as best they could, opened up a beehive in a cliff cavity or a hollow tree, reached inside, paid the price, broke off a piece of comb, and ate whatever they pulled out. Probably didn't eat the bees, adults, but the honey, the wax, and the brood was all fair game. The point I want to make is that this was how we started. This was the earliest process we had for gaining honey, eating honey, anything that went along with it. Everything that we've done since then has been to improve, purify, make cleaner, make more wholesome, to add more to the food quality that they were having. That's the beginning. As we moved along, we expected more. We wanted more. And here we are today. So if you can tolerate this busy slide just for a minute, I want to work my way through to show you that each one of you who are listening and viewing are probably going to have a different perspective of what you need, what you want from your honey goals of sorts. Certainly your personality and personal characteristics are going to play a role. And I can tell you that you've already gone by the first step, because if you're listening to me talk, watching these pictures that I'm putting by, you're already in a novel group. I mean, you're already kind of strange. Most people run, scream, and shout when they're surrounded by vast numbers of bees, and yet here we are, clinging to them, running toward them, totally intrigued by them. So right away, your personality is an indicator that this is going to be a positive attribute for you. I'm going to change that word. That's not a good descriptor. Diet, that's not exactly conveying the meaning that I wanted. But what I'm trying to ask, are you the kind of person who wouldn't mind seeing a bee leg floating in some what you know is organic honey? Or are you the kind of person who would much rather that honey crop have been pressure filtered and be bright clear? I mean, it's essentially the same product in many ways. So the way you perceive honey as a food, the way you perceive honey having to be processed, would ultimately have an effect on the kind of equipment that you think you're going to need buying. What's your bee management philosophy? On one extreme, are you the person who names every one of their bees and goes out every afternoon to be certain that they're all home safely? Or are you the person who philosophically sees bees as a macro livestock herd, that you happen to have hundreds of thousands of producers in your herd? Each one of those is a different philosophy. The first person is more in tune, more careful, more selective in how much honey they take, how much they're going to use and leave. People who are more inclined to see bees as production animals are different in their philosophy. They're supposed to work, produce, have a reasonably good life, and then end it all. So there's a bee management philosophy that's going to tell you how much equipment that you need, what kind of equipment that you want, and how to go about procuring it. Do you plan on having your colony numbers grow? Or are you what you're going to be at this point? Are you on the balcony of a high-rise apartment building in Denver? Or are you on a wide open plain in Illinois on a large farm, and you can have as many colonies as you want there? So what do you see your future being? If you're going to start small and stay small, then that's going to have an effect on the kind of equipment that you buy. That will be dependable, though small, for many, many years to come. Or do you plan on just blowing through the ceiling and becoming one of those beekeepers who goes from nothing to an amazing number of colonies in a short while? Unless a beekeeper inherited the operation. And that happens a lot. You know, there's 2, 3, 4th generation beekeepers that inherited large operations. If that didn't happen to you, and you started out in beekeeping on your own, then you started as a hobby beekeeper. You started with a few hives, you learned, and then at your own rate, you grew. So this lack of increase thing, intent to increase, all of those things can be factored in as to what you would want, need, or be able to get. And interestingly, and I'll talk about it later, could you sell it if you wanted to get larger, more? I need to know your other interests. Are you still working full time? You got family, kids in school. You got grandkids. I've got 6 right now. I'm trying to gently train them to become beekeepers. And my daughter, with my oldest grandson, said, sure, you can teach him to keep bees and show him all that he needs to do. But he better not get stung. I don't want to have to deal with that. So that was quite a mandate to take my own grandson out. I had him so bundled up that he could have literally survived a tornado. So to be absolutely certain that I wouldn't have to face my daughter if I took my grandson back stung up too soon. So she was right. It's a chance to introduce him slowly and bring it along. But see, that family involvement and babysitting grandkids and having other responsibilities like that will take away the time that I would have spent single-mindedly if all I did was keep bees. What other interests do you have? I have an interest in bluebirds. I'm not very good at helping them survive, but I do try every year. I love woodworking. I don't do it very much because I got grandkids and bees. But I have these other interests. The woodworking thing's very useful, though, for repairing equipment, building equipment, whatever. What about your health? If you've got mobility problems, physical limitation problems of whatever kind, not my business, then that's going to decide what kind of equipment you get, how you set it up, how much work's involved in it. It's kind of surprising, even when you know it's coming, to age. So things that I could have done 15, 20 years ago, in some cases just a few months ago, just because of ever-increasing age, I reconsider now. I like tables in the yard. I like stands. I like the colonies raised 18 inches off the ground. I don't want to have to bend over to the ground for anything, so your health begins to affect the way that you run and set up your extracting operation. I don't know that I'll have a chance to say this later, but you'd be surprised how tiring it is to take a full frame of honey that can weigh anywhere from 7 to 10 pounds and lift it up above shoulder height and then put it inside an extractor. But you've got to have the extractor high enough from the floor to be able to get some kind of catch tank underneath it. So there's all kinds of ways that your health affects how you're going to be handling that and what's going to be going on. These all tiringly, boringly, painfully bring you to the point that you have to develop your concept for your honey processing needs by developing who you are and what you want that to be in the future. I was going to make this thing the real expose of what to expect. And it's like telling a young man what it's like to be old. Why would you do that to him? He's going to find out soon enough. Leave the man alone. So why would I take away this from you? But it's a messy job. Even when you're as neat and clean as you can be, you just can't help scattering some honey here and there, a little drip here. Well, you step in that drip, and then you get the as you walk across the floor. And then from that one drip, you've got 9 sub-drips scattered all over. So just be prepared. It's perfectly normal. It's totally common. It's to be expected that honey is sticky. Stuff's heavy. After you process the comb and get it as clean as you can and put it in storage, it's probably going to mold the least bit. There may be some mold on a container you left sitting around. We don't know of any pathogenic molds that affect beekeeping, but on that sweet, thin surface, it's not uncommon to have it happen. Combination of wax and propolis can just drive you up the wall. When I was at the bee lab there in Worcester, of course, we had propolis on the floor back in the extracting room, and combination of wax and propolis. There were these fellows who had come around selling industrial cleaning supplies. And this guy announced that he could make that floor back in that extracting room look just like new. And 2 days later, and about 50 products later, he left a broken man. The only way we could absolutely get that wax and propolis off the floor from extracting from what was then several hundred hives was to hire students to sit on the floor with a razor scraper and scrape it up. So that won't happen in your kitchen, that won't happen in your house, but you're going to have to deal with these parts and pieces that stick and whatever. If this sounds negative, just hang on until we get to the end, and you've got that nice golden honey in a jar. It'll become worth it. One thing you may not think of is what I've named nuisance bees. If you're extracting, that probably means the flow is over in your area. Now, you could be one of those people who are Johnny on the spot and extract everything normally as it's produced. So super on, fill it up, take it off, extract it, put it back on. I don't do that. I have to set up a little operation here in my retirement years. It's in the way. It's messy. See all the things above. So I extract it all at one time. But that period of time means that you're going to attract all the unemployed bees in the neighborhood, probably from your colony. So I know people who extract outside, and it is a bizarre scene. I mean, you have to wear full protective gear, and there are just bees everywhere. So later on, I'm going to suggest that you don't do that if at all possible. Extract in an enclosed room or at least in a screened room. So expect bees to want to come help you extract your honey. I mean, think about it. You got that extractor running, it's like a huge fan, and it's just aerating the whole area. You got using a hot knife. It's every signal that a bee needs to come and buzz there and check everything out. So these are issues that you need to expect. It's me trying to be truthful, but not trying to be absolutely gloomy. It's a pleasant, rewarding job, but it has some issues about it. Bizarre as it might seem, before I have my comments on this whole extracting operation, is extracting even really for you? There's people on that web page that I showed you who do nothing more than, in one way or another, a kitchen knife, a remodeled, I don't know what they're called. Women used to use these things when they had puffed hairstyles to raise their hair. Denise, if you're there, what was that thing called that women would use to raise their hair?
Jim, I had some big 80s hair, but I'm not sure. A crimper or
something for teasing hair, wasn't it? For teasing hair?
Mm.
It doesn't matter. Sometimes those things are used. Sign back off. I'm sorry to bother you, Denise. But sometimes those things are used just to scrape along and tear the cappings off and open. So once that's done, then they just lay it over a large flat pan. I would like to think it's kind of in a warmish room, but I don't know that they're even doing that. And then the honey is just allowed to drip, literally over a period of weeks, to drip out. Well, that's got to be a patient person, and I'm afraid in the meantime you may get an occasional other insect stuck in there, but they're very happy with it. It's dirt cheap, super simple, takes time. I would like to add, kind of as a downer, that honey absorbs moisture from the air. So if that honey is just laying there in a thin layer like that, it's going to become remarkably higher moisture honey than it would have been in the comb. What does that mean? It means it's going to ferment more easily inside the jar unless you're planning on eating it right away. So draining's okay, easy to do, fairly simple. That's just a click and a half above eating it out of the hive, though. I want you to look at this picture on the right from the Kelly Bee Company. Denise, does my cursor work on the screen, or are the viewers not able to see it?
They don't see your cursor, Jim, but you have a little arrow up at the top right that you can toggle on and off and move that around.
All right, so from this company here, the Kelly Bee Supply Company, this still manufactures these basswood sections from the early days when you could produce honey in section combs. And I want to show you what that is. Folks, this is the last page between us and oblivion for a way that we kept bees and produced honey for 150 years in these section boxes. Now, there were all different kinds of section boxes. There were 4x5s. They were rectangular. There was this kit here, the split bee waste sections. There was solid bee waste sections. To me, amazingly, in the 1910s, 1920s, on Pullman cars, on the train systems, instead of putting out little plastic Smucker containers of jelly, these beekeepers produced honey in basswood sections that were 1 to 1.5 inches square. So instead of getting a little jelly pack, you got a little honey pack, actually with the wood surrounding it and everything. Well, let me tell you, the bees absolutely hated that contrivance. But nonetheless, it existed for a while. This has increasingly, steadily gone away. Honey in the comb was greatly revered because its purity was almost assured. If someone extracted honey, they could load it up with sugar syrup, even all those years ago, forced it off as honey, and who's the wiser, and beekeeper would make more money out of the deal. So all these devices here are those years of basswood section honey producers. This container down here at the bottom that you pack it in has been the same container for the 40 plus years that I've been beekeeping. I've been keeping bees. And the irony is, if you can see that green arrow, right in those corners, the bees would leave that section open. So if they build up here, in this section here, they would completely fill this out with comb, but they would leave a hole in each corner. And the purists hated that. So every one of these boxes was designed so that those corners were covered. Well, beekeepers being a clever lot, every one of you out there is a clever lot, came up with round sections, of course, had no corners. So this was the Ross round device for producing honey in round sections. And this is page 69 over here in this catalog. On the other side in 68, on page 68, was the device for producing these round sections. This was called Ross Rounds by Thomas Ross. Denise, he lived over in Massillon, Ohio, and he was just down the road from us. And he's the one who designed these things. And to this day, they're still called Ross Rounds because of being named after the guy who perfected the system of it. Okay, looks like the end of the world here. It really isn't. You start with the full deeps, full supers of honey. You uncap it with something into a capping tank. That means the cappings, the dripping honey, all falls into that. Then you got to have a container. Small scale can be a 5-gallon bucket. If you're larger than that, there's all kind of uncapping containers. So while the extractor is running, they stay in the uncapping holding device. After it's extracted and the honey is spun out, it goes to the settling tank, which is usually heated. And that will allow all the wax cappings and bee wings and stuff to rise to the top where it can be skimmed off. It can be further filtered here. And filtered isn't really the right word, more like strained here. And then from this bottling tank, honey flows out to here. So to simplify it, you've got to have an uncapping device. You've got to uncap into something, and you've got to have an extractor, and you've got to have a 5-gallon bucket or a tank or something to put it in. Now you notice that in my diagram I've added bungs to everything so I can drain the honey off the bottom. All this other stuff floats on top. So this might look worse than it is. This is the complete, simple cycle that every bee operation follows. And you, if you're a smaller beekeeper, just follow parts of it. Mainly the uncapping knife, the uncapping tank, the extractor, and the settling tank are the components that you're going to have to run a basic operation. All right, we've been through all this. Been almost painful. Who are you? What kind of extractor do you want? You have any interest in producing honey that's not extracted? So, liquid honey is what you want. You've made the commitment to it. We move right along to get an extractor. I told you I was a woodworker. Well, in the woodworking business, these wood planes, old wood planes, are just off the charts. Everybody seems to want to put wood planes in Cracker Barrel or Bob Evans or somewhere and show these things off. You don't see many hand saws. You don't see a lot of rulers. It's wood planes. In the beekeeping world, it's an extractor. It's the premier focal point of the room. Whether it should be or not, I don't know. You can decide in a bit. But you're going to get an extractor. Plastic, stainless steel, galvanized are your options. I didn't say much about galvanized. That stuff was made absolutely bulletproof. I mean, an extractor made in the 1930s would make 3 to 4 extractors now. So you will see these things at farm sales, auctions, equipment stores, antique stores. But that stuff's all galvanized, and you don't really know about the solder. Sometimes lead was used in the solder. So if you want to try to reactivate those things, really clean them up nicely, and then coat them with clear epoxy, and keep them coated with clear epoxy to be sure that they're made safe to use. What size do you need? Are you that person that's going to just need a 2-frame? That plastic extractor down here in the front will probably be fine. It's going to be difficult to tie down. And extractors wobble. Every extractor of any size wants to wobble. Is it going to be motorized? No, I won't need a motor on mine. I'm just extracting a small amount of this stuff. Well, you'll be surprised how much the motor on an extractor to run that machine while you go back over here and uncap will be much appreciated. Where are you going to buy this thing from? More about that in the next picture. How much are you going to pay? You're probably going to pay a lot either way. Extractors are expensive to make, and so they're expensive to buy. If you buy these units, though, especially the metal extractors, are going to last you multiple lifetimes. Used ones, yep, you can depend on used ones. Beekeepers outgrow them. Beekeepers don't keep bees any longer. There's all kind of reasons you might find a used extractor. How are you going to mount this thing? That's the universal issue. If you've got an interesting way of mounting an extractor so that you reduce the wobble or control the wobble, I wouldn't mind hearing from you, just on what you've got done. In my youth, the first third of my life, my dad had a paint supply business. It's not a huge operation, but it was large. And we had multiple paint shakers. They were the old shakers that just stood there and took a gallon of paint and shook them like crazy. Well, those shakers would walk all over the back warehouse room. If you tried to tie them down, they just ripped up the mounts. And we found out in the paint business that if you took a truck tire, cut it in half, and then attached the truck tire to the floor, and then attached the paint shaker to the half truck tire, that half truck tire would withstand the vibration and cut the inflection. So I've never done it, never tried it, probably never will, but that really slowed down the extractors vibrating, the paint shakers vibrating in the old days, and I've always thought that the same thing would happen in the new days. And you're going to need other stuff. But right now, hand cranked, motorized, plastic, whatever, used, those kind of options are going to be available to you. I sound like I'm a fossil, but I've seen a lot come and go. When I was a young man, you could buy extractors from 3 or 4 places. You could buy them from Kelly, you could buy them from Maxent, you could buy them from Dadant, and you could buy them from Root. Now these things are manufactured all over the world, and many of the extractors that we have manufactured are coming from Eastern Europe, from Poland, Italy. So have a look. It's no longer just U.S. made. There's some nice equipment. This bee interest in bee population has not just been in the U.S. That interest has been around the world. It's just centrifugal force that slings this stuff out. One of the good things about a motorized extractor is that if the honey is really thick, you can just let it run longer and longer until the honey is slung out. If the honey is warm and just came off the bees, the extractor pictured here and the hand crank is certainly good enough. Sounds like I'm selling motorized equipment. I'm really not. I'm just trying to convince you of the diversity that you can have between these various systems. And I've hammered on this a lot. Down here at the bottom, they all require some kind of dampening, some kind of attaching to something. Or you do understand why, right? because when you fill those things full of frames, the frames aren't balanced. So one frame may be full of honey on both sides of the comb. The one next to it may be half full, and the one across may be just have some honey in it. Well, when you spin that, it's out of balance. And these extractors that require the frame to be taken out and turned around, the tangential extractors, you'd run that for a while, spin out the honey on one side, and then flip those combs and spin the honey out on the other side, all cranking at low speeds. And then after you got that load kind of equalized, then you can kind of jack up the RPMs on either the hand cranked or the motorized version. So that helps a lot to help this thing keep them vibrating all over the room. This is the litany of everything that you could use to get those cappings off. And you might say, well, how hard can that be? They're nice, soft wax cappings. Well, if the honey's a year old, it can be amazingly difficult to get those thick, heavy propolis cappings reinforced. So the knives that you want to to uncap with are really these two here on the sides, these electric knives on the side. There's 4 shown, but the 2 on the left are the ones that are most popular, especially the one on the far left because it has an individual temperature control. This is a cappings plane. It's still available. It's been around, I guess, forever, and I guess I ought to buy one. I have never used one in my life, but they're in the Bee Supply magazines, and this is heated. It's a cappings knife, and as you pull that along, the cappings scoot out through that opening there, and away they do go. Same issue here with this older one. These are just capping punches. They just roll along the top of the comb and punch holes in the cells. These are the capping scratchers that I was trying to describe, looking like those comb. I don't want to go back in that. I never could think of the name of it. But these are capping scratchers, and they're also used just to tear the combs off. And these are cold knives. If you just had just a simple kitchen knife, you'd like to have a serrated edge, but you'd like to have 2. So you've got one in really hot water while you're using this one. And then as the one that you're using really cools down, pick up the one in hot water and then put the one that's cool back in hot water. So if you're a small operation, really small, use a knife, use 2 knives and heat them as they come and go. But one way or the other, you got to get those cappings open. Now let me tell you, back up here in these kind of things that just puncture cappings, or this device here that tears cappings open, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because that will uncap and that will let the honey extract, but it will put significant amounts of cappings in the honey that you're going to have to strain or filter out some other point later in your operation because it's got so much in it. This is a new device here. It's new to me, hardly just a month ago. And it's got raised edges. So you can drag those edges across, and it does a decent job of either tearing off honey that the cappings that the hot knife wouldn't get, or to tear off cappings in general. This device down here basically uses the same operation. This is the device in the lower left-hand corner. You turn the crank, and it just runs the comb that's laying flat underneath a series of rollers that just cuts slots in the cappings the same way this would here. This device here is around $2,000. It's an offset cam, and the knife vibrates here back and forth, and as you let it come down over it. $600 or so. This is a chain flail uncapper. No reason to go into it. By the time you're ready for this, you'll study it in detail. Closer to $3,000, $4,000, I think. If I'm wrong, Mexcent, I'll apologize to you, but I'm saying that by the time you get to this level of needing these kind of devices, you will be far beyond the expertise of my few comments here. You will grow into that need. So what are you going to uncap into? There's special containers that are made. The cappings drop here. The honey is able to drip down below. You can let that drain out. This is a real world situation. I thought I'd show you one picture of what to expect. This blue device, you lay the frame on the top. There's a capping knife back here in the back, and you uncap into it. Honestly, a 5-gallon bucket's not large enough, but there are 5-gallon buckets everywhere. You can buy them for $2 to $3 to $4 at Lowe's, Home Depot, anywhere, Walmart, and uncap into them. This is a different model. There's a groove cut in the back so that it fits the groove up here. This is where the end bar goes, and it holds it while you uncap into that. This is messy. It'd be better if you had a larger pan like this down here, and you could improvise ways for these gadgets to work here. So be prepared. I got a few more pictures of those coming up here that will show how that's involved. We're at this point now. We're just getting to this point here, uncapping and running the extractor. But I wanted to say that there's an offshoot here where you take that wax capping and you run it down to your wax melter. And I'm not going to mention wax melting devices today, except that this is the breakaway point where the wax goes into the melter and results in rendered wax coming out that side. But that's a crop you don't want to lose. This is a simple theme. An extractor tied to a workhorse that I use in the bee yard. I love ratchet straps. You ought to have these things all around you all the time. It does a good job of keeping this tied down. The extractor still wobbles on this stand, not as badly. The honey flows out into here, and then I do whatever I want. You bottle it, you strain it, you filter it, you sell it, extracted. This is my uncapping device, and this is that yellow piece and the knife that you saw more real world like what it looks like before. This is just a simple theme that I've been showing you in that diagram the whole time. The white boxes here just represented my honey waiting to be extracted. So honey waiting to be extracted, uncapping system, extractor, liquid honey flows out, and then from this point you either clean it up or whatever. To go to absolute extremes, and this is the machine I was showing to you in the very first picture, this is a behemoth. The equipment comes in here, the full supers are set here. This is an automatic frame remover. It goes into the bogan chutes uncapper, goes all the way down to 120 to 140 frame extractor. From this point, the honey is spun out, pumped back around. There's a capping centrifuge. This is the high-end model, and as you very well know, I'm only showing you this to show you the extremes of the systems and to let you know that it works exactly the same way. You've got to uncap, you got to have centrifugal force, and then you got to deal with the cappings, and you got to deal with the liquid honey. More often than not, the kitchen. That's where it's going to be. I don't know this guy, so I blurred his face enough that I hope that you don't know him. Picture's not that old to me, but I was intrigued to see that phone hanging on the wall there. But I've only had the picture about a year. Never mind all that. I'm rambling. Got a nice motor on that probably 4-frame McCent. Got variable speed control on it. If you'll look down here, he's got a simple filter system set up on top of the 5-gallon bucket. Excuse me, my voice is giving out on me. And the thing I wanted to point out for sure, got a bung on the extractor, got a bung on the catch tank. He's installing a bung there. He's got a bung ready to be installed, and he's put one just on this heavy gray cargo container that you can buy anywhere. He's doing exactly the right thing there. I think he's smiling as much as he is because he really hasn't started this extracting operation yet. Because the first time a drop of honey hits the paper, it's going to stick to his shoes. So extracting in the home kitchen is common. It's probably going to cause some disconsternation among the family member who's not really eager to have extracting performed in the kitchen. But nonetheless, this is a typical operation that you could expect to get by with a small number of colonies. He's got this set up on wheels, and these wheels will contain some of that extractor vibration as that thing rolls and bounces back and forth. This system here is in flux and it's out of balance. This is a huge extractor, probably 80. I would estimate that to be an 80 frame data extractor radio with a DC motor drive. It's a deluxe machine. This is a cowl and chain drive uncapper. The equipment goes up here, the frames go here, they're chained forward, drop down through 2 vibrating knives. Cappings fall down to a heat tank, and then on a chain drive out here, the uncapped frames are pushed forward. Then they go into this extractor on this side, and you see down in below here where the bung is, the valve opening comes out into a sump attached to a pump. And then this is where it kind of goes peculiar. The honey is pumped around into a remarkably small, old galvanized tank. The settling tank in reality should be almost the size of the tank on the extractor. So the point I want to make is that many times you have a fixed amount of money. And this guy has invested a lot of money in these pieces of equipment here. But what happens beyond that yet must still be on his horizon, because these tanks are not designed to withstand that much settling. So he's probably 2 runs through this extractor over here. This thing's going to be full, so it's not going to have time to settle. Maybe he doesn't care. You know, if you're selling your honey to a commercial operation, they will certainly be able to clean it up. No problems there. So the whole point of this, parts of it is a nice operation, but it appears to be an operation that was in flux. It's an old picture. I had to bring it out from a slide, so I apologize for the pixelation there. What about this place? It's absolutely spectacularly beautiful. This guy and his wife were both sophisticated electrical technicians with a major company. He knew what he was doing exactly. The room is absolutely beautiful. I was afraid to walk on the floor. But he's still got kind of small extracting operations. Behind it is a flail uncapper of a different kind. And he's got these 2 extractors here. And then he just captures it from this large, nice room. He just captures it in 5-gallon buckets. And then depending on the variety or the types of honey he's extracting, he had these individual bottling tanks set up. So he would take the honey to this tank and just raise it up and pour it in. He's a better man than I am. That's about a 60-pound can of honey that he's pouring. So it's going to be a heavy lift to get it done. But I wanted to show you another view of how much interest some people put into doing this kind of thing. Again, I said that he's working commercially and industrially. He had the talent and the skills to do a lot of this himself. But it's about the nicest looking room I've ever seen. Outside the same picture here, this is what we were looking at, the large room inside here, and a few of his bees showing up there in the background. A really nice high-end extracting operation. This is my beautiful extracting operation. Set this thing up and do my work, break this thing down and put it away. This down below is my garden trailer, and it worked beautifully when I had it hooked to my small garden tractor. But when I brought it into the shop, didn't bring the tractor in, so when I tried to extract, even though the springs on the trailer absorbed the vibration from the extractor, this thing really bounced around too badly. So extracting on a trailer might be a good idea, but it needs to be attached to an anchor of some kind. The thing I wanted to show you, though, is I had really good luck fast. It's better on this end. I just wrapped a large, must be 2-inch ratchet strap around, and then I captured with a smaller inch, maybe 1.1 inch ratchet strap, and hooked it on the connecting bolts on top, and then ratcheted that thing down, and it really held it nicely. So that's kind of a freebie. I'm an absolute believer in ratchet straps. I can't imagine life without those things now. So that worked out very well. What I want to confess to you, and what I don't have time to go into, was that I've got some very, very cold, old honey I couldn't extract last year. I had some issues with my mom and my life and her life, so I missed the whole year. And the honey this year was very thick and hard to do. These are snow mats that are not authorized to be used as tank heaters, but they're working. But they can get hot. So I'm not recommending this, the heating mats that are shown, but they worked for me under these conditions. If you try that at home, you need to know that it's not a proven technique, and you need to be with it the whole time it's working, or don't do it. These big operations have all of these requirements, and so this is the kind of characteristics that the guy I showed you a bit ago with the beautiful room had to meet. So I wanted to tell you that if you're extracting anything to sell or produce, you may want to check with state regulations and see what they're going to require you to do there, because there's a lot of characteristics that especially the commercial guys have to meet before they can be approved as a food grade processing operation. So what about us? You know that one picture I showed you, the big extractor and the big uncapper and the small tank? As best you can, keep your line balanced. If you're in this for the long haul and you're going to have beyond 10 to 15 colonies, I'd like to think that you're going to be getting a stainless steel extractor that's motorized, and you're going to be using heated knives at least. If you're in this just for enjoyment, plastic and simple improvisation, 10 hives or less, you're using kitchen knives, you're using a plastic extractor and 5-gallon buckets, it's a 3-hour job and you're over. So that's a much simpler operation. I'd like for you to consider doing it indoors or in a screened room. I really would hope you have at least cold water. Hot water is heavenly. All the tanks should have easily installed bungs on the 5-gallon buckets. Get a hole cutter, set to the right dimension, drill a hole in the 5-gallon bucket, thread that thing up. It's easy to do. Simple strainers, you don't use filters really until you're much larger, 400 hives. But simple strainers to connect it. Ready supply of ratchet straps. And then always expect whatever you're not anticipating. Ratchet strap works loose. Extractor comes off. Pours honey on the floor. What are you going to pick that up with? So you want things like a metal dustpan or something along that line to be able to just respond to whatever surprise comes your way. Good day, good extracting process, no surprises at all. I told you early on when I was telling you how it could be sticky and messy that this was the end result. This is the stuff that has made honey exactly what it is. It's a lot of work, but when you get to the end, it's a nice, wholesome product. It's highly coveted, and in most cases, very easily marketed. Good luck with it.